Alexander the Great was one of the most prominent figures of the ancient world, managing to conquer most of Asia in a short time and whose name is known even after 2,000 years. Although his empire did not last too long, it was able to leave its mark on the history of the whole of Asia. Today we will try to find out the life story of this great commander, how he was like, what life path he spent through, and what he did during his short life. Enjoy watching. Alexander Macedonian was born in Pella, a city in ancient Greece in 356 before Christ. He was the son of the king of Macedon, Philip II, and his fourth wife, Olympias, daughter of Neoptolemus I, king of Epirus. Although Philip had 7 or 8 wives, Olympias was his principal wife for some time, likely because she gave birth to Alexander. In his early years, Alexander was raised by a nurse, Lanike, sister of Alexander's future general Cleitus the Black. Later in his childhood, Alexander was tutored by the strict Leonidas, a relative of his mother, and by Lysimachus of Acarnania. Alexander was raised in the manner of noble Macedonian youths, learning to read, play the lyre, ride, fight, and hunt. When Alexander was 10 years old, a trader from Thessaly brought Philip a horse, which he offered to sell for 13 talents. The horse refused to be mounted, and Philip ordered it away. Alexander, detecting the horse's fear of its own shadow, asked to tame the horse, which he eventually managed. Plutarch stated that Philip, overjoyed at this display of courage and ambition, kissed his son tearfully, declaring, "My boy, you must find a kingdom big enough for your ambitions. Macedon is too small for you," and bought the horse for him. Alexander named it Bucephalus, meaning ox head. Bucephalus carried Alexander as far as India. When the animal died, Alexander named a city after him, Bucephala. When Alexander was 13, Philip began to search for a tutor, and considered such academics as Isocrates and Speusippus, the latter offering to resign from his stewardship of the academy to take up the post. In the end, Philip chose Aristotle and provided the Temple of the Nymphs at Mieza as a classroom. Mieza was like a boarding school for Alexander and the children of Macedonian nobles, such as Ptolemy, Hephaestion, and Cassander. Many of these students would become his friends and future generals, and are often known as the companions. Aristotle taught Alexander and his companions about medicine, philosophy, morals, religion, logic, and art. Under Aristotle's tutelage, Alexander developed a passion for the works of Homer, and in particular the Iliad. Aristotle gave him an annotated copy, which Alexander later carried on his campaigns. At the age of 16, Alexander's education under Aristotle ended. Philip II had waged war against the Thracians to the north, which left Alexander in charge as regent and heir apparent. During Philip's absence, the Thracian tribe of Mede revolted against Macedonia. Alexander responded quickly and drove them from their territory. The territory was colonized, and a city, named Alexandropolis, was founded. Upon Philip's return, Alexander was dispatched with a small force to subdue the revolts in southern Thrace. Campaigning against the Greek city of Perinthus, Alexander reportedly saved his father's life. While Philip was occupied in Thrace, Alexander was ordered to muster an army for a campaign in southern Greece. After the victory at Chaeronea, Philip and Alexander marched unopposed into the Peloponnese. Welcomed by all cities, at Corinth, Philip established a Hellenic alliance, which included most Greek city-states except Sparta. Philip was then named hegemon of this league and announced his plans to attack the Persian Empire. When Philip returned to Pella, he fell in love with and married Cleopatra Eurydice in 338 before Christ, the niece of his general Attalus. The marriage made Alexander's position as heir less secure, since any son of Cleopatra Eurydice would be a fully Macedonian heir, while Alexander was only half Macedonian. During the wedding banquet, a drunken Attalus publicly prayed to the gods that the union would produce a legitimate heir. At the wedding of Cleopatra, whom Philip fell in love with and married, she being much too young for him, her uncle Attalus in his drink desired the Macedonians would implore the gods to give them a lawful successor to the kingdom by his niece. This so irritated Alexander that, throwing one of the cups at his head, then Philip, taking Attalus's part, rose up and would have run his son through. But by good fortune for them both, either his over-hasty rage or the wine he had drunk made his foot slip, so that he fell down on the floor, at which Alexander reproachfully insulted over him. In summer 336 before Christ, while at Aegae attending the wedding of his daughter Cleopatra to Olympias' brother, Alexander I of Epirus, Philip was assassinated by the captain of his bodyguards, Pausanias. As Pausanias tried to escape, he tripped over a vine and was killed by his pursuers, including 2 of Alexander's companions, Perdiccas and Leonidas. Alexander was proclaimed king on the spot by the nobles and army at the age of 20. News of Philip's death roused many states into revolt, including Thebes, Athens, Thessaly, and the Thracian tribes north of Macedon. When news of the revolts reached Alexander, he responded quickly. In a short time, Alexander suppressed the rebellion in Greece and, like Philip, was appointed commander for the coming war against Persia. Taking over the invasion project of Philip II, Alexander's army crossed the Hellespont in 334 before Christ with approximately 48,100 soldiers, 6,100 cavalry, and a fleet of 120 ships with crews numbering 38,000, drawn from Macedon and various Greek city-states, mercenaries, and feudally raised soldiers from Thrace, Paeonia, and Illyria. He showed his intent to conquer the entirety of the Persian Empire by throwing a spear into Asian soil and saying he accepted Asia as a gift from the gods. This also showed Alexander's eagerness to fight, in contrast to his father's preference for diplomacy. After an initial victory against Persian forces at the Battle of the Granicus, Alexander accepted the surrender of the Persian provincial capital and treasury of Sardis. He then proceeded along the Ionian coast, granting autonomy and democracy to the cities. From Halicarnassus, Alexander proceeded into mountainous Lycia and the Pamphylian plain, asserting control over all coastal cities to deny the Persians naval bases. In spring 333 before Christ, Alexander crossed the Taurus into Cilicia. After a long pause due to an illness, he marched on towards Syria. Though outmaneuvered by Darius's significantly larger army, he marched back to Cilicia, where he defeated Darius at Issus. Darius fled the battle, causing his army to collapse, and left behind his wife, his 2 daughters, his mother Sisygambis, and a fabulous treasure. He offered a peace treaty that included the lands he had already lost, and a ransom of 10,000 talents for his family. Alexander replied that since he was now king of Asia, it was he alone who decided territorial divisions. Alexander proceeded to take possession of Syria and most of the coast of the Levant. In the following year, 332 before Christ, he was forced to attack Tyre, which he captured after a long and difficult siege. The men of military age were massacred, and the women and children sold into slavery. When Alexander destroyed Tyre, most of the towns on the route to Egypt quickly capitulated. However, Alexander was met with resistance at Gaza. The stronghold was heavily fortified and built on a hill, requiring a siege. When his engineers pointed out to him that because of the height of the mound it would be impossible, this encouraged Alexander all the more to make the attempt. After 3 unsuccessful assaults, the stronghold fell, but not before Alexander had received a serious shoulder wound. As in Tyre, men of military age were put to the sword and the women and children were sold into slavery. Egypt was only one of a large number of territories taken by Alexander from the Persians. After his trip to Siwa, Alexander was crowned in the Temple of Ptah at Memphis. It appears that the Egyptian people did not find it disturbing that he was a foreigner, nor that he was absent for virtually his entire reign. Alexander restored the temples neglected by the Persians and dedicated new monuments to the Egyptian gods. Also, he reformed the taxation system on the Greek models and organized the military occupation of the country. Leaving Egypt in 331 before Christ, Alexander marched eastward into Achaemenid Assyria in Upper Mesopotamia and defeated Darius again at the Battle of Gaugamela. Darius once more fled the field, and Alexander chased him as far as Arbela. Gaugamela would be the final and decisive encounter between the two. Darius fled over the mountains to Ecbatana while Alexander captured Babylon. Alexander then chased Darius, first into Media and then Parthia. The Persian king no longer controlled his own destiny and was taken prisoner by Bessus, his Bactrian satrap and kinsman. As Alexander approached, Bessus had his men fatally stab the great king and then declared himself Darius' successor as Artaxerxes V, before retreating into Central Asia to launch a guerrilla campaign against Alexander. Alexander viewed Bessus as a usurper and set out to defeat him. This campaign, initially against Bessus, turned into a grand tour of Central Asia. Alexander founded a series of new cities, all called Alexandria, including modern Kandahar in Afghanistan and Alexandria Eshet in modern Tajikistan. During this time, Alexander adopted some elements of Persian dress and customs at his court, notably the custom of proskyneses, either a symbolic kissing of the hand or prostration on the ground, that Persians showed to their social superiors. This was one aspect of Alexander's broad strategy aimed at securing the aid and support of the Iranian upper classes. The Greeks, however, regarded the gesture of proskyneses as the province of Dia and believed that Alexander meant to deify himself by requiring it. This cost him the sympathies of many of his countrymen, and he eventually abandoned it. However, after some time, a plot against his life was revealed, and one of his officers, Philotas, was executed for failing to alert Alexander. The death of the son necessitated the death of the father, and thus Parmenion, who had been charged with guarding the treasury at Ecbatana, was assassinated at Alexander's command to prevent attempts at vengeance. Most infamously, Alexander personally killed the man who had saved his life at Granicus, Cletus the Black, during a violent drunken altercation at Maracanda, in which Cletus accused Alexander of several judgmental mistakes and most especially of having forgotten the Macedonian ways in favor of a corrupt Oriental lifestyle. Meanwhile, Greece enjoyed a period of peace and prosperity during Alexander's campaign in Asia. Alexander sent back vast sums from his conquest, which stimulated the economy and increased trade across his empire. However, Alexander's constant demands for troops and the migration of Macedonians throughout his empire depleted Macedon's strength, greatly weakening it in the years after Alexander, and ultimately led to its subjugation by Rome after the Third Macedonian War. East of Porus's kingdom, near the Ganges River, was the Nanda Empire of Magadha, and further east, the Gangaridai Empire of Bengal region of the Indian subcontinent. Fearing the prospect of facing other large armies and exhausted by years of campaigning, Alexander's army mutinied at the Hyphasis River, refusing to march farther east. This river thus marks the easternmost extent of Alexander's conquest. Alexander tried to persuade his soldiers to march farther, but his general Coenus pleaded with him to change his opinion and return. The men, he said, longed to again see their parents, their wives and children, their homeland. Alexander eventually agreed and turned south, marching along the Indus. Along the way, his army conquered the Malhai and other Indian tribes, and Alexander sustained an injury during the siege. Alexander sent much of his army to Carmania with General Craterus, and commissioned a fleet to explore the Persian Gulf shore under his admiral Nearchus, while he led the rest back to Persia through the more difficult southern route along the Gedrosian Desert and Makran. Alexander reached Susa in 324 before Christ, but not before losing many men to the harsh desert. His closest friend, Hephaestion, died of illness or poisoning. Hephaestion's death devastated Alexander, and he ordered the preparation of an expensive funeral pyre in Babylon, as well as a decree for public mourning. Back in Babylon, Alexander planned a series of new campaigns, beginning with an invasion of Arabia, but he would not have a chance to realize them, as he died shortly after Hephaestion. Moreover, it is not even clear how the Macedonian king died off. Some say that he died of fever, others that he was poisoned. Given the propensity of the Macedonian aristocracy to assassination, the foul play featured in multiple accounts of his death. Alexander's death was so sudden that when reports of his death reached Greece, they were not immediately believed. Alexander had no obvious or legitimate heir, his son Alexander IV by Roxane being born after Alexander's death. However, soon the squabble for power destroyed the empire, during which the entire family of Alexander was killed, and the Macedonian power split into several parts. Anyway, how was the true Alexander? During his conquests, the king destroyed and sold whole cities into slavery, founded many other cities in his honor, and considered himself almost a god, which was typical for many rulers. Mostly, he was a narcissistic egoist with megalomania, in which he was partly right because Alexander was a brilliant commander who did not lose a single battle. However, on the other hand, he was also a tyrant, which is not surprising for that period. We can't say that he was good or bad, but we will not deny that this man has managed to achieve unprecedented success to this day, capturing almost half of the world at such a young age. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. Write in the comments your ideas for the next video. Subscribe, and see you later. Goodbye.